so much. Before we delve into the session, I'd love you just to share your story. Do tell your experience in this, in this space. What are some of the problem areas that you saw, and what birthed your current solution slash company as it is right now? Yeah, it should be on.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So my name is Bilha Ndirangu. I currently serve as a CEO of a tech company called Africa's Talking. And we do multiple things, but at the base or the core of everything that we do, our aim is to make it a lot easier for software developers that are building solutions in Africa to access the infrastructure they need. So an example of that is we help software developers connect with telco services, just given that it's quite difficult to, say, incorporate a telco service like SMS or USSD in something that you're building, just given that most telcos don't necessarily look to work with individual developers. And there's quite a few hurdles, whether it's regulatory requirements and the technical requirements, etc. And so we built a company that's focused on identifying what are those challenges that make it a lot harder for digitization to happen on the continent. We provide that infrastructure, and in a sense, the word we use is democratize access to it. So whether it's access to telco services, payments, now starting to look at things like IoT and just other technologies that we think if we made it a lot easier for developers to access them, then the rate of digitization on the continent would accelerate.
Wow, that's powerful. Well, part of my company solution has actually been using your services. So I can say kudos to that. I am a testimonial that you've made it easier. So speaking to probably the infrastructure side of it, right? What are some of the key challenges that you've seen in terms of building some of these bridges and gateways? Are regulators really, embracing this, or are developers embracing this? Do developers feel that they need to build some of these frameworks on their own because they feel that's what works for them? Or do you feel as an probably intermediary in this sense that you can shoulder the burden more for developers and regulators?
Okay. I think speaking from the side of developers or software developers, or anyone that's building a solution, usually you're trying to find the fastest way to market or the fastest route to market, and using the least resources, the least amount of time, and the least hurdles, as it were. So I would say for that side of the divide, the easier we can make things for them, the better. And of course, if you talk to them or you talk to a lot of them, they would say they wouldn't want to deal with any regulations, etc. So for them, it's, the less the issues they have to deal with, the better it is. On the flip side, and I think as some of the earlier panelists were talking about, and just what's come up in the previous conversations, regulations are important, and it's important that we're not operating in sort of wild west situation, because as someone said, when things go wrong, they really do go wrong, and it's important that members of the public or whoever it is that's affected by the services that are being provided is protected in some sort of way as far as regulations are concerned. Now, to your next question around what are some of the challenges that we've seen, I think one is just the fact that even any basic infrastructure we're talking about, so say a telco provision, is just the fact that it's quite divided, and it's so you can imagine if you're trying to incorporate a technology and you have to deal with you're trying to reach mobile subscribers on the continent, or just even in a country like Kenya, you have to think about what happens to Safaricom, Airtel, Telcom subscribers, and those are completely different audiences and different integrations that are required. Not to mention when you start thinking about going to other markets like, say, Uganda, etc. We're just trying to expand across the continent. So the fact that there is such technologies or whatever it is that's you're trying to access, you really have to deal with multiple providers by the time you get what it is that you're looking for. When you think about regulations, again, I think was mentioned earlier, the fact that we don't necessarily have similar or uniform types of regulations across markets. So you find that what you need to get done, say, whether it's if you're building something that has to do with payments, the regulations you have to deal with in, say, a country like Kenya, what CBK offers is quite different from what the central bank in, say, Tanzania or Uganda would offer. And as a company that's trying to build and provide services across the continent, I mean, we are Pan-African, so I think we always think about things from a continent-wide perspective. It almost feels like every person, you almost have to start from scratch every time that you're building a new, you're going into a new market. And usually the issue is not the technology, because the technology is scalable, and what you build can pretty much scale across multiple markets without having to worry about it being a new market. Usually the problem is all these other things, the providers, the regulations, the fact that you almost have to start from scratch every time you go to a new country. And that can take up to a year. And from a business perspective, that's really expensive. And more so, I think that's actually one of the things that's probably delaying the uptake of digital services or solutions on the continent.
Right. Now, there's something very key that you've mentioned, especially on the market side. Would you say that Africa is technically ready actually for some of these apps and services? Because there you go, you have your app already working in Kenya, functional with the market. You want to step over into Uganda. Now it takes you that here. So speak, I think, more to the business community, or the business here, the entrepreneurial ear. Is Africa truly ready for that level of scale? And what are some of the initiatives that you might have under Africa's talking to, kind of cover that 1 year risk?
Again, I think if I understand your question correctly, so we are asking, are we as Africans ready for the services? I would say yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I look at the rate of adoption of any digital service, especially by Kenyans, it's quite amazing. I mean, they're usually willing to try out any new services, and you can look at it from, I mean, I'll look at some of the digital lenders that do, there's been this whole proliferation of digital lenders, and you've seen how people have really taken it up.
Serious.
When you look at things around credit or the solar credit industry, it's quite large, and it's all driven by technology. So the one thing I would say is Kenyans in particular, but I think Africans in general, are willing to take up digital services, and more so because, in a sense, because we didn't really develop the way other markets did. The uptake of digital services almost becomes our way of leapfrogging the need to develop the way other markets have done. So case in point, I think the ever used example of M-Pesa. The reason why people really like it, or I believe one of the reasons why it really took off for mobile money in general, is because we didn't necessarily have the kind of access to banks and credit cards and that kind of financial adoption, or that level of financial access that, say, the Western world has. So the fact that we actually don't have a lot of those things that are common in the Western world, anything digital tends to be a good way to sort of leapfrog that and still provide the services that people are looking for. So whether it's access to money, whether it's access to education, looking at some of the stuff that's being done with farmers, where farmers are now using mobile services or mobile phones to either get information on when to plant or pricing services, etc. So there's a lot of that, because at the end of the day, people want their solutions solved. I think that's a universal need. Digitization becomes one way to get those solutions solved in a manner that's a lot more scalable than, say, we have to do these things in a brick and mortar way. So on that side, people are willing to take on the services. Now, of course, there's the issues around, now again, going back to the whole idea of regulations and pricing and just the cost of doing business in some of these markets. That just makes it sometimes a lot harder.
Yeah.
So I think for me, I'd be looking at it more from, it's not a demand question, it's more a supply question. And it's figuring out what are those things that are making it a lot harder for us to supply these services as digital providers.
Wow. And I actually love the way you've broken that down. Now, we're here in a bit of a transition between fourth and fifth industrial revolution, right? What would you say are some of the technologies, let's say AI, IoT, that you guys are implementing, or at least doing some R&D/research or tests on currently?
So a couple of things. So we are looking at IoT quite seriously. So we actually have a team that's and actually providing a product around that. So that's something that developers and any business that's looking at using IoT in their offerings. It's something that Africa's Talking, for example, can provide. And starting to look a lot deeply at artificial intelligence, but not so much the way I think people sometimes think of AI, and there's all these, I guess, movie type ideas of what AI really is.
Actually, allow me to interject at this point. Like, now that you're on the industry front and actually on doing this, then are there myths to artificial intelligence? Are we ready for Internet of Things? Because we hear all these ideas about Internet of Things and all these robots taking over, and it sounds like such a utopian future, really. So can you just give us now that practical edge where you guys are already implementing this or giving? Yeah, so please shed light on that.
I mean, I think about, let me just take an example of IoT. I mean, it's something that's already to a large extent with us. I think the only thing that's really, I would say, limiting the full adoption of IoT in, say, Africa is just things around internet connectivity, etc. Because at the end of the day, it is the Internet of Things. So the need for really fast internet and reduce latencies, etc., is quite important for IoT to really take up in the manner that it should. But I mean, we're already starting to see the use of it. I mean, I'm seeing clients starting to use things like smart meters, smart water meters, for example. So the unlike the olden days where someone had to come and manually read what's on your meter and how much have you consumed and then send you a bill. So just simple technologies that allow you to, or allow a landlord to say, what, this person hasn't paid for their water, so let's automatically switch off their water. And then you as a person can immediately pay for your water, and you don't have to wait for someone else to come and reconnect your water meter. So there are those kinds of use cases that are already starting to become a lot more common. But again, as I said, I think definitely limited quite a bit because of our latency issues as far as internet on the continent is concerned. The second thing around AI, again, there's definitely the utopian aspect that people look towards.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think we listen to people on both sides of the divide. I mean, I've had luminaries such as Elon Musk, etc., say that they're actually really worried about the AI future, but then there are people who really are excited about it. So I think the debate is still out there as far as what the real future of AI, when it's fully actualized, what that would actually look like. But there's already a lot of artificial intelligence that we use in our day-to-day lives. I mean, people don't, you probably, a lot of us use Google, and there are lots of predictions that it will do. So for example, it will figure out what's the closest, you could ask it like, what's the closest restaurants to you, or it finds ways to learn. I think for those of you who use Gmail, you'll find that it can actually do predictions around your email, etc. Because a lot of these kinds of use cases are already that are permeated and already part of us. It's just that it's not labeled AI, so people don't realize that it's actually artificial intelligence that's behind it. But yes, to your point, there is a question to how far should or can we push these technologies? And maybe this provides, because it's still, to a large extent, the jury is still out there in terms of how far AI will get pushed. And Africa is still quite behind in terms of understanding AI and what it actually means for us as a continent. So I think it might actually be a good time for us to think through, what does AI mean as a continent? Do we need to start thinking about not necessarily stifling regulations, but some regulatory conversations about what does AI mean, what does IoT mean from a privacy perspective, from data collection perspective, data privacy perspective, etc. And before it really becomes the regulations catching up, I think is actually an opportunity for us to start thinking about that before it becomes something that we are really now worried about.
Exactly. And I would say, even for me personally, I would really rather advocate for being proactive about these innovations, options, conversations, rather than reactionary and worried. Because I mean, if you're worried about something, you honestly can't think about it, to be practical as that. So it's looking at the apps that we already have, the platforms that we're using, services, and seeing, oh, okay, we can build upon this. And really, it's that it can only get better from there. I mean, from the days when email was a bit of a battle to now, well, it's a key to hundreds of services, really. It's that we've come a long way in terms of integrating these things into our daily lives. So I'd love to invite the audience, in case you have any questions toward this session, just on understanding innovative technology is innovative technologies in Africa. Any questions from the audience? Or comments as well? Do you feel that we are ready for this fifth industrial revolution?
That's a good one. Are we ready for this?
Are we ready for this? Even for you personally, there's no wrong or right answer. I mean, we're here to have the conversation, just trying to wrap up the session.
Of course, we are ready for that. And we look more even to more technology to come because environment do change.
Okay.
And the customer needs always change.
All right.
So we are ready.
All right.
Watch the space so that the innovative people who are there like her,
Yeah.
let them do it.
Yes.
And they must do it based on our needs.
All right. Thanks a lot for that. I see there's a lady as well at the back there. So if you could respond to that question, are we ready for that?
Of course. We have to move with the times. We can't be left behind.
Yes.
Mm.
All right. All right. Oh, there's also another gentleman right there. It would be good to hear whether you're on the negative or on the positive.
I guess my thinking is there's us being ready to adopt these technologies.
Yeah.
And there's the enabling environment. Is the environment enabling enough for us? And as it was noted by the key speaker, that we need really, really fast internet for this, like 5G and stuff. And we're still stuck with 4G in Kenya at the moment. And most African countries still have like 3G or 2G. So I'd say we are not ready in terms of like the enabling environment. But as a proactive entrepreneurial Kenyans and Africans are, I think we are ready to adopt it, but we just need that enabling environment.